Lily, the class is criminal law. It's actually it's the 22nd video lecture of this semester, although it's properly listed this week on the Moodle website as 23. I'll probably try to go back in there and change the name of that shortly. But anyway, lecture 23 given after the test. Today we want to start talking about a broad area of types of criminal activity known as property crimes. Meaning they don't necessarily involve physical harm to a person, but they mainly involve property issues. And all of that starts in your text, actually on page 359. We have a number of cases regarding the issue of what's called burglary. And got a handout on these property offenses, and I'll be giving that out. Posting it online probably before Friday, so y'all take a look at it. Again, these are various statutes regarding so-called property, what West Virginia calls crimes against property. The first thing we always talk about is the crime of burglary. A term, by the way, which has been in use since Roman times. And that's because historically, the one place that we always wanted to be the safest in and have the least fear in is your home, wherever you live. And the thought of someone coming into your home and stealing everything you own, or going through all your possessions and different things, is in many instances as bad a shock to you as if they shot you. Again, that's because it's our personal possessions that are being trifled with, our privacy. Now, I'm going to confess that we here in the United States don't have a lot of expectations of privacy anymore, given what social media and the internet has done to us and is going to continue to do to us. However, most of us still don't want people coming into our homes and, stealing our belongings. So I guess the first real question here is, what is the standard definition of the crime called burglary? And burglary has been used certainly in the English language for at least 400 years. So it's an old term. It comes from German, Saxon times, Anglo-Saxon times. Okay, burglary is typically defined as entering or breaking of a dwelling place with the intention to commit a felony. That's essentially paraphrasing the West Virginia definition. Entering or breaking a dwelling place with intent to commit a felony. So let's look at a few terms of that definition. Breaking and entering. Two different concepts. And I'm not close enough to the door here with this camera to show, so I'll try to do my best. And I'm going to look back here at the doorway. There's a common law concept called breaking of the closed, meaning that there is a fine line between the inside of your house or the inside of your apartment and the outside, which goes out the door. Okay? People here in class can see this better, I guess, than those. Inside, outside. Breaking the close or breaking in means crossing that line between the outside and the inside of your house. Okay? Now, breaking also implies the use of some type of force, no matter how minor, of getting past that dividing line. Lots of cases talk about the mere fact of turning the door handle and opening the door to an unlocked house being enough force to be a breaking. Okay? And to my knowledge, except perhaps in some rare cases where maybe the door to a house was left wide open, right, and all you had to do was walk in, most home intrusions meet that test of breaking. Now, entering. Entering means putting somehow or another at least part of a person's body inside the premises, inside the house. And we'll look at a case, see if I can find the case. Which I'll talk about a little later. Yeah, the case of Walker versus State, that's on 374 in your text, but it essentially involves the issue of an individual who essentially holding a stick goes inside a corn crib to get corn out of it. It's an old case, but just putting, for instance, your finger or your hand inside a window meets the test of entering, okay? Any part of your body, or as the Walker case talks about, any tool that you have your hand on which goes inside the premises is enough to satisfy that legal requirement of entering. Okay? Now, the West Virginia Code talks about breaking and entering without breaking, being burglary, being one of the key definitions of burglary. All right, the next real question, however, is, other than these simple definitions of what we mean by breaking and or entering, is the issue of dwelling house, sometimes referred to as residence. That's where you live or where you are living. It doesn't necessarily mean, by the way, a house or an apartment. You know, there are lots of homeless people, tens of thousands of homeless people, incredibly enough, in this country who have no place to live or call home. They have all their belongings usually in a shopping cart they push around, or maybe a bag. There's any number in New York City and other places who carry around with them a fold-up cardboard box, and that's what they crawl into at night to sleep in. We actually have cases from New York City in which people, right, have climbed into the cardboard box of somebody and stolen their belongings, and that was held to be their dwelling place because that's where they lived. It's kind of a sad state of affairs, I confess, to talk about that, but I'm trying to say that. Here in West Virginia, one of our peculiarities we have regards real estate laws and what's considered a house or home or not. For instance, mobile homes, or I guess we're supposed to call them now manufactured housing, are not owned or titled as is real estate homes, that is other homes on real estate property. A mobile home is titled in this state just like an automobile is. And if you buy a mobile home from the lot, what do you get? You get a title to the mobile home as if it were your car. The reason for that is because when mobile homes first started coming into operation, and still do, they came with wheels attached to the bottom, so it could be moved, right? So the reality is, therefore, that most mobile homes are treated as if they are personal property, not real estate or real property. And thus it is that there, for some time, was an issue of if someone broke into your mobile home, was that a residence or dwelling place as defined in common law, which talked about, homes being built on property. My answer is, if you're living in it, it's a home. There's an awful lot of people, recent book or series of articles on it by a lady who basically did a lot of investigative reporting on a large number of people who travel around this country in sort of an underground economy, and the only home they have is an RV. They're not usually fancy RVs, but they're RVs, and they simply drive them from place to place, finding employment. They could travel all over the country. Is an RV a home? Well, I've known lots of people who lived in RVs. I've known lots of people who basically live in camping trailers. Like Airstream or others. They basically live in a campground. I'm always reminded down in the state of Virginia, right on the other side of the Greenbrier River, where the power plant is down there at Glen Lynn. There's a large camping area, which people again have campsites in all up and down that area on the side of the river. And I was surprised to learn that probably half of all those campsites are permanent homes. I mean, they just look like, fifth wheelers or something moved onto the site. People live now. So again, it's not the nature of the place, it is the home of the place. Which leads me to a famous West Virginia case. Very famous. Cited all through law school. The case is called State versus Neff. It's on page 360 in your text. Now, State versus Neff, well, it's an old case, 1940. It always reminds me, I guess, of one of my favorite cartoon strips in the Funny Papers comics called Snuffy Smith. Snuffy Smith, by the way, has been printed now for almost 70 years. It's hard to realize. Originally called Barney Google and Snuffy Smith. Snuffy Smith is a characterized hillbilly, for want of a better term, who basically apparently does not know what it means to go to a store and buy prepared chicken to cook for dinner. his idea of Sunday chicken dinner is to steal a chicken from one of his neighbors and then have his wife prepare it for him. And he's always being put in the pokey for stealing chickens. Okay? And that's a cartoon strip, and that's one of the running gags, right? That he's always carries around with him a large bag. If it doesn't have stolen chickens in it, that's what the bag's for, right? Go to somebody's chicken coop. Well, the reason I mention that is because that's what this Neff case is about. Let's read the first sentence out of it. The two Neffs were charged with burglariously breaking and entering in the nighttime a chicken house. In other words, a chicken coop, which is an outhouse adjoining the dwelling of so-and-so, and stealing from him his chickens valued at $30. This is the Neff brothers, okay? That's right. So Snuffy and his companion have, that's what this case is about, chicken thieves. And the issue of the case is that he's charged with the crime of burglary. But the issue of the case is that under the West Virginia statute, burglary is a residence. You have to burglarize something is a residence. Now, there is a separate criminal offense in West Virginia called breaking and entering. And breaking and entering means breaking into some kind of structure other than a home and stealing from it. Burglary is 1 to 15, breaking and entering is 1 to 10, but they are two separate crimes and have always been treated as such because of this distinction of what it is that people are breaking into. Okay? Now, that leads me to one of my discussions of old-timey law, legal concepts. I'm glad I have this blackboard here, and I hope the camera can pick up my scribbling properly. Common law had a concept called a curtilage. Now, curtilage. An old English concept which meant the home or your house and buildings situated around it in the basic living area. And it's from the time in which most of the U.S. was, agriculturally based. So if you go to a typical farm, and I've been to many, you're typically going to find a central farmhouse people live in. Here's the farmhouse, a little smoke coming out of it. Okay, front porch, door. And around that farmhouse is going to be a number of different buildings. They're called outbuildings. Okay. So here's a typical house with a garage where you park your car in. You might have a shed out here on the side where you store lawnmowers and stuff in. Lots of people just use their garages for that, but, anymore it's pretty easy to buy a pre-built, outbuilt and have it hauled onto your property. And various other outbuildings. In former times, people lived in the country didn't have a lot of, didn't have refrigeration and freezers. And they preserved food by either canning, drying, or smoking, with meats particularly. Again, particularly here in the southern part of the country, where pigs were the prevailing animal being raised, you would take a pig and smoke parts of the pig to make ham and bacon. And so you'd have a building which would be called a smokehouse. And in that, basically, the meat would be hung up and then wood smoke used. That along with salt and other preservation things to preserve the meat. A good dry cured ham could last years. My sister lives on a rather large farm down in Tazewell County, Virginia, and there's a building around the old farmhouse there that in former times was used for one purpose only, and that was for the drying of peaches or apples. And so all the walls in the building are very thin shelves, about this thin, that people put halves of peaches or apples on, and then heated up the building and dried them out, preserved them. Some of y'all may have, what do they call them? Devices for drying fruit and vegetables, dehydrators. You may use to make jerky with, right, or dried fruits or vegetables. I confess, some dried fruits and vegetables, okay. I've never been much for dried green beans or leather britches, as they're called, because that's what they taste like to me, even after they've been soaked and cooked. But, I've known lots of people who make, dried apples and pies and things. Anyway, I digress. The building is only used for drying fruits and vegetables. It had no other purpose. So old-timey farm buildings had a lot of places, and of course then, there are some. That out back behind the house would have a very small place called a privy. But most of us refer to today as an outhouse. Although the case law, when we start talking about these, don't refer to an outhouse as the outdoor bathroom. They refer to an outhouse as any building in or around a house, okay? Now, the West Virginia statute says that any of these outbuildings which are connected to or adjoining the residence are treated as if they were the residence. So this garage here, if it has a covered walkway, which is between the house and the garage and is covered to it, then it's part of the residence. If it's built right next to it, like lots of your modern homes, right? The garage is simply part of the house, right? That's an adjoining building, so breaking into the garage is burglary, just as if it's breaking into the living quarters of the house. Now, this is a complicated discussion of this case because it talks about burglary of an outhouse not adjoining the property. An outhouse, again, in this case, doesn't mean a privy. That's P-R-I-V-Y, meaning a private place. And now I confess that under modern health rules, it's really illegal in most counties to have an outhouse anymore. They want you to have a septic tank, but anyway. So, here's the question. Is a chicken coop a residence? Now, who's living in the chicken coop? Is it the family? No, it's not the family. All right, let me modify my drawing again. Right here is public roadway. Okay. And in the next case, on this side of the road, is a chicken coop. Okay. By the way, I hope y'all watching this can see my brilliant drawing. It's as good as I'm going to do. All right. The chicken coop is on the other side of the road from the house. So there's no question it's not adjoining the house. And it's not attached to it, right? So the question is it a residence? Well, let's see. Its diameters is a floor space of 4 feet long, 4.5 feet by 5 feet. Let's see, 4.5 feet is to the desk in this class put together, right? Yeah, just about, right? A little bigger. About 5 feet. So in other words, basically it's the space here in our classroom of 4 desks. Okay? It has a door, which is a hinge door that has a chain. You pull up the front of the building. Okay? And the height of the case initially is not talked about all. If you look the case up, it's about 4 feet tall. Just big enough to keep the chickens in. Is that a residence? And this case says no. Okay? No. And in this case, they're saying when we talk about an outhouse or an outbuilding, it means something big enough for a person to be able to walk into. And obviously, to get into this chicken coop, you're going to have to be able to crawl into it. You can get in it. Chickens can get in it, but humans, it's not designed for humans. You might have a weasel or a fox or a coon gets in it, but, not people. So, the case, therefore, is decided on the fact that just because it's called a chicken house doesn't mean it's a residence. And therefore, the 2 Neff brothers, the thieves in this case, rules that this house can't, because this isn't a residence, isn't a domicile, and therefore they cannot be convicted of the crime of burglary because it doesn't meet the statutory definition. Now, on the other hand, if it were something other, they were charged not with burglary, but with breaking and entering, could they be convicted? And that answer, here's an old Arizona case in your text called State versus Mann, in which the woman and her husband in the case had been arrested while trying to rob, of all things, a Salvation Army collection box. That's right. A box sat out on the corner, for people to donate, food and things, clothes and stuff to. The irony of the case is, and I'm good friends with the local Salvation Army individuals, that if they'd just gone to the Salvation Army headquarters, they'd have been given the stuff for free. Instead, the woman is caught trying to climb into the box. Apparently, I've always thought that she's about halfway in and halfway out. Now, whether she was stuck in it and her feet were dangling out in the air, I can't tell you that. But certainly, we have this image of a police seeing this woman trying to crawl into the box through a very small trap door, right? And stealing clothes out of the Salvation Army box so she can later resell them. The box is 6 feet high, 4 feet deep, and 4 feet wide. Okay? This is breaking and entering. This is a structure that you can break and enter into, and the answer in this old man case, 1981 case, is yes. Okay? The person is caught red-handed stealing out of the box, climbing in that little hole in the bottom to get the stuff out of it. The property is not abandoned. It is owned by the Salvation Army, right? When you put it in the box, you basically are giving it away, and therefore the lady is guilty of the crime as charged. Again, in this case, there was about third-degree burglary, but third-degree burglary is basically defined as breaking and entering in West Virginia, okay? All right. So, the size of the structure, or what the structure is, doesn't matter. Now, residence, on the other hand, implies that you're living in the place. So there's always a problem that comes about with people who own vacation homes, timeshares, condos, or whatever, that they don't live in year-round. Here we are in middle October. It's about time for all our West Virginia snowbirds, as I call them, to start going down to Florida or other climes, although as we approach my namesake, Hurricane Michael is getting ready to hit the Florida Panhandle. And it's probably soon going to be roaring through the city of Atlanta with hurricane strength force and winds. I think it's supposed to hit landfall, about an hour after I finish talking today, and then it'll come in this direction. But they're saying the storm is so strong that when it hits Atlanta, it'll still have winds of 100 miles an hour. My son lives in Atlanta, and I sympathize. Atlanta is certainly not accustomed to that kind of storm. And it's going to be coming all the way up the East Coast. So, anyway, vacation home. Yeah, I don't think I want to be going to Florida right now for my vacation. But what if my timeshare called for me to be in South Beach, Miami, right? Last 2 weeks of October, and so I go down there and stay. If I'm not living at my house, but I'm staying in my vacation home, there's a burglar who breaks into my vacant home guilty of burglary. Is it really a residence or not? Good question. What if someone breaks into and steals things in my timeshare or my rental or my condo or whatever? In other words, a place where I stay only part of the year. Uh-oh, a guilty offender of one of the Lily rules. The main offense is that damn ringtone person has. That's the offense. All right, you got me off track now. I think the answer is to look at the end at this very short case of Woods v. State, an old Mississippi case. And I'm going to talk about that next class period. I'm off track now. We'll take more up next class period on burglary and other assorted property crimes. With that in mind, I'm going to sign out for the day.